Night fell over Old Town with a solemn hush, as though the wind itself feared to disturb the hush of secrets locked behind ancient stone walls. The Citadel's bells had rung for dusk, but the usual clamor of novices and acolytes along the cobbled walkways was muted this evening. A chill nipped at the air, unusual in a city so far south. Lantern light shimmered off the whispering sound, reflecting upon the pale towers of the high tower and glinting across the Citadel's spires like watchful eyes. In a cramped corridor deep within the labyrinthine halls of the Citadel, Archmaester Walgrave walked with the careful, measured steps of a man who had long since learned the weight of knowledge. A single black raven perched on his shoulder, oddly quiet as its master's breath hissed in anxious bursts. Walgrave was known for his scholarship on ravenscraft, yet even a novice could sense something more profound preoccupied him tonight, something that had nothing to do with sending messages and everything to do with containing them. A few paces behind Walgrave trailed a young acolyte named Boros. He carried a lamp that sputtered with pale yellow flame, illuminating the torchlit corridor just enough to reveal the worn stones underfoot. Shadows danced across narrow walls lined with dusty tomes, scrolls, and half-burned candles that lent a faint tallow smell to the air. Boros had spent his life serving in small capacities around the Citadel and harbored dreams of forging his maester's chain one day. No small aspiration for a boy from a minor merchant family. On this night, however, such dreams weighed heavily in his mind, as the hush draping over the Citadel suggested dark knowledge was stirring, the kind that might threaten not just ambition, but life itself. Walgrave paused at a spiral staircase that twisted downward into older vaults rarely visited by novices. Boros had never ventured there. The stone steps were worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, but they remained uncertain, as if each step might crumble into some hidden catacomb. Walgrave's hand, wrinkled and spotted with age, rested on the iron railing. He glanced at Boros. The old man's eyes were heavy-lidded, glassy with the worry of what lay below. "This way," he whispered, voice cracking as though it were the first time he'd spoken all evening. The raven on his shoulder ruffled its feathers but made no sound. Boros followed, each footstep echoing in the narrow well of stone. They descended into a subterranean passage that twisted deeper under the Citadel's foundations than Boros had realized existed. The temperature dropped, and the lamp's flame flickered in the growing damp. At length, they arrived at a massive iron-banded door set with a heavy lock. Walgrave produced a key from his robes. The key itself was not like the standard ones used for storerooms or tower locks. This one was made of Valyrian steel, or so Boros guessed from its unusual sheen. Walgrave inserted it into the lock, which groaned in protest. The door swung open, revealing a chamber behind it. Walls of black stone, carved with runes that seemed to swallow the lamplight, greeted them. Boros's breath caught in his throat. He had heard tales of the Citadel's secret repositories, vaults that contained knowledge forbidden to the uninitiated. Archmaester Walgrave stepped inside, and the young acolyte followed warily. In the center of the chamber stood a long wooden table laden with scrolls and tomes, some half-rotted with age, others well-maintained. A single glass candle stood on a pedestal at the far end, its dark, smoky surface quivering with faint luminescence. Boros's eyes flicked to it. Tales claimed the glass candles were old Valyrian artifacts that burned with magic, though he had never seen one lit. This one, half illuminated in the gloom, pulsed with an otherworldly glow. So faint it was almost imperceptible, yet undeniably present. Walgrave approached the table. The raven on his shoulder let out a quiet caw, as though in disapproval. The Archmaester lifted a large tome bound in tarnished iron clasps. The cover bore a sigil that Boros did not recognize, a stylized dragon skull etched in silver. Walgrave's gaze lingered on it for a moment, his features etched with melancholy and fear. Then he placed it gently down and beckoned Boros closer. "Look at these scripts," Walgrave said, his voice hushed as if they were in a crypt. "Read them carefully, lad, for you have been chosen to bear witness to truths that few novices ever learn." Boros set the lamp on the edge of the table, leaning forward to examine the open pages. The writing was an archaic form of High Valyrian, interspersed with symbols that looked vaguely like alchemical notations. Here and there, diagrams depicted dragons, some writhing in the sky with flames bursting from their maws, others lying in defeat, limbs twisted unnaturally. Surrounding these images were arcane diagrams featuring runes reminiscent of the ones carved into the black walls. "Archmaester," Boros said carefully. "Are these spells?" Walgrave closed his eyes, exhaling heavily. "They are records of the black arts, gleaned from the ashes of Valyria before the doom. Our citadel was founded on knowledge. Yes, but it is also burdened with the responsibility of safeguarding the realm from knowledge too dangerous to be left unchecked." Boros watched the old man's trembling hands. "Why show me this?" The Archmaester's eyes flickered to the glass candle. The flicker within it grew faintly stronger, as if it fed on the tension in the air. "Because you have the makings of a true scholar, Boros. You have the curiosity but also the caution. Not every bright mind is fit for this. Some would abuse such knowledge or succumb to it. The Council, they wish to keep the realm safe. They fear the return of dragons, should another Targaryen or some new pretender learn the secrets that made that line so mighty. Our order has studied ways to end such threats before they begin. You must understand that this knowledge is not to be used lightly, or even often, but it is our duty to hold it." Boros's hand hovered over one of the diagrams. He sensed an unease, as though dark tendrils of possibility slithered up his arm. The image depicted a circle of robed figures standing around the outline of what looked like a dragon egg, intricate runes drawn around it in concentric rings. In the center, a single dagger, its blade shimmering with the suggestion of Valyrian steel, pierced the egg, with thin lines spiraling outward, reminiscent of cracks. Boros swallowed. "Is it a method of destroying dragon eggs?" "Methods," Walgrave corrected. "Plenty of them. This is not the only treatise. Others speak of binding the will of living dragons, corrupting their birth, even unraveling the very fires of their hearts. Each technique is more terrible than the last." He closed the tome with a shudder. "It is not all. This vault holds treatises on how to create illusions to mislead Targaryens or would-be dragon lords, to sow discord among them so they never unite. Books on how to poison clutches of eggs, ensuring that if any survive, they hatch stunted and frail. And more horrors you cannot begin to imagine. It was only with reluctance that our predecessors collected them." Boros felt his mouth go dry. He had grown up hearing romantic tales of dragons, of their terror, yes, but also their grandeur. The Targaryens had been dethroned, and the last known dragons had perished long ago. Yet the question remained, was it truly wise to keep such knowledge, let alone use it? "What does the Citadel intend to do with all of this?" he asked, voice tentative. Walgrave's gaze drifted to the glass candle again. For a moment, the reflection in his eyes suggested he might have glimpsed something beyond mortal sight. "Use it if we must," he said. "Rumors have reached us, disturbing rumors of eggs hidden away, some unaccounted Targaryen blood somewhere in the east, perhaps even in Westeros. The Archmaesters are concerned. If dragons were to rise again, the realm's stability would be thrown into chaos. Already, the memory of the Mad King's tyranny remains fresh enough to cause unease, but the long memory of dragons is more frightening still. Should that knowledge find new keepers, should new dragons be born, war and devastation could follow." They lingered there, the flicker of the lamp casting elongated shadows of both men across the black stone walls. Then Archmaester Walgrave quietly closed the heavy tome and guided Boros back up the winding staircase. The locked vault door sealed behind them with a clang that seemed to echo through the corridors of Boros's mind. In that moment, the young acolyte felt like he had stepped beyond the threshold of something far greater than he'd ever anticipated. He suspected his life would never again be as simple as scribing notes on raven behavior or assisting with menial tasks in the rookery. That night, in his cramped dormitory cell, Boros found sleep elusive. He lay on his cot, listening to the distant hoot of owls mingling with the soft rush of the river outside. His mind churned over the forbidden lore, the diagrams, the spells, the Citadel's mission to prevent dragons from ever returning. Yet a small whisper in him asked, should knowledge itself be the enemy? Or was it only the fear of what that knowledge might bring? Part of him thrilled at the chance to become privy to these arcane secrets. He had always been a studious boy, hungry for the hidden corners of the world. But another part felt dread coiling in his gut. The old proverb came to him then, dark wings, dark words. He prayed it was not so literal a statement of his future. The following weeks brought a disquieting tension to the Citadel. Boros noticed archmasters huddled in corners, murmuring in hushed tones. The novices noticed an uptick in the secrecy of library archives. Entire shelves were suddenly restricted, with only certain maesters allowed access. Here and there, Boros caught glimpses of uneasy expressions among the older scholars. Whatever was happening, it seemed more than just rumor. Something spurred the Citadel's highest echelons into quiet, anxious action. Boros busied himself with daily tasks, mucking out raven cages, copying manuscripts on medicinal herbs, assisting Archmaester Vale with an examination of a sickly falcon. Yet, beneath the routine, he felt a tremor of possibility that threatened to burst. He began to visit the older archives at night, under the pretext of practicing his reading of High Valyrian. With great caution, he found partial references to the vault where Walgrave had taken him. It was centuries old, rumored to be a place where the Citadel stored documents salvaged from Valyria before the Doom. No definitive mention existed in the common indexes, only cryptic allusions. The deeper Boros looked, the more convinced he became that the Citadel had always had a secret branch, maybe not widely known, but crucial in shaping the fate of dragons in Westeros. As time wore on, news trickled in from distant corners of the world. A black-bearded sailor fresh from the Jade Sea told an innkeeper in Old Town that he had seen a monstrous reptile flying near the smoking sea. Word drifted about in hushed whispers, eventually reaching the Citadel's ears. Another rumor, from Pentos, told of a wealthy magister who possessed a clutch of 3 eggs, rumored to be petrified yet prized as relics of old Valyria. Separately, each rumor might amount to nothing, but together they stoked the Citadel's vigilance. Even more disturbing was a traveler's tale from Lys, where a shadowbinder from Ashai was said to be buying dragon lore at exorbitant prices. The Council of Archmaesters convened in private, their sessions guarded even from ordinary maesters. Boros learned that an archmaester named Marion had been dispatched on a secret mission to Essos. Marion was an authority on Valyrian glyphs and had studied under Walgrave. The whispers claimed he was tasked to investigate these rumored eggs, to see if there was any truth to them. Boros overheard Archmaester Vale in a heated conversation with Walgrave, insisting that more direct action was warranted. "We cannot let history repeat itself," Vale had said, voice trembling with something beyond anger. "We cannot allow the ravages that the Targaryens wrought with their dragons to ever happen again." At night, Boros's dreams became haunted by swirling shapes of fire and scale. He dreamed of black wings spreading over the sky, of cities aflame, of screams echoing beneath a dragon's roar. But he also dreamed of grand creatures, ancient and wondrous, soaring majestically. Upon waking, the duality gnawed at him. The Citadel's mission was to protect the realm from chaos, yet was the act of eradicating dragons, living marvels, intimately tied to the history of this world, truly righteous? One late evening, Boros was summoned to Archmaester Walgrave's chamber. The older man sat hunched at a desk strewn with scrolls, his raven perched on a high shelf, regarding the boy with beady eyes. "Boros," Walgrave began, stroking his gray mustache, "I require your assistance. I am sending a letter to Archmaester Marion in Essos, and I need a copyist whose High Valyrian script is impeccable." He slid a sheet of parchment across the desk. Boros saw that it was a coded letter, the lines of text interspersed with obscure references to Valyrian runes. Walgrave pointed to the beginning. "This is written in a cipher known only to a few in the Citadel. Transcribe it carefully onto fresh parchment. Make no errors. Then ready a raven to sail aboard a fast ship. We dare not risk a direct flight over the narrow sea with our usual birds. We need stealth." Boros bowed, heart pounding. "Of course, Archmaester." He spent the next few hours meticulously copying the cipher, line by line, verifying each symbol. His candle burned low by the time he finished. He took the letter to the rookery, where a seasoned maester prepared a raven to be taken by a courier on a ship bound for Lys. Boros watched as the sealed scroll was tucked into a leather cylinder. The bird squawked, unsettled by the nighttime activity. In that moment, Boros felt a pang of uncertainty. The fate of dragons, and perhaps of the realm, could hinge on such small acts. A few strokes of a quill, a single sealed scroll. These were the subtle levers by which the Citadel aimed to shape history. Within a fortnight, word arrived that Archmaester Marion had vanished. The ship he was rumored to have taken from Pentos to Volantis was found adrift near the coast, its crew slaughtered. Of Marion there was no trace. The news spread through the Citadel like wildfire, igniting fear and speculation. Whispers abounded. A pirate attack, shadowbinders, warlocks from Karth. Some said Marion had been betrayed by the Magisters in Pentos. Others spoke of a hidden cult that worshipped dragons as gods. But none knew the truth. The Archmaesters convened yet again, and their tension became palpable to even the lowliest novice. Boros found himself pressed into more secret tasks for Walgrave, translating obscure passages about wards that could sever the bond between a dragon and its rider. The more he read, the more the darkness weighed on him. One afternoon, Boros was summoned to the solar of Archmaester Vale. He had never spoken to the man privately, for Vale was known to be stern and humorless, with a chain of links representing various disciplines. Astronomy, mathematics, warcraft, and more. Vale was imposing even for an Archmaester. His nose was aquiline, his cheeks sunken as though consumed by years of study. He sat behind a desk in a richly furnished chamber, a stark contrast to Walgrave's more modest quarters. Bookshelves of polished oak lined the walls, each stuffed with rare volumes. A brazier crackled, filling the room with a faint smell of incense. "Boros, sit," Vale said without ceremony, pointing to a stool. The acolyte complied, bowing his head respectfully. Vale's gaze was sharp, appraising. "You have been assisting Walgrave, yes? He speaks well of your diligence." He steepled his fingers. "I have a proposition for you. We fear that Marion has been lost in Essos under suspicious circumstances. Our mission remains unchanged, but our method must adapt. The Citadel cannot act brazenly. There is knowledge in Essos we must either safeguard or destroy, knowledge that might lead to the resurgence of dragons. We are organizing a small delegation, covert, to seek out these rumors. You, Boros, have been volunteered. One of our brothers will accompany you, a maester named Ceres, whose specialty lies in potions and illusions. Another is an alchemist from Lys who owes the Citadel a great debt. You will sail under the guise of simple scholars, traveling to research trade routes. In truth, you are to find what Marion sought." Boros's pulse quickened. A mixture of pride and dread welled up in him. "But Archmaester, I am but a novice. Why would you send me?" Vale's eyes narrowed. "Because you speak and read High Valyrian better than most full maesters. Because Walgrave trusts you. And because, if all goes awry, you can vanish more easily than a chain-bearing maester known to foreign courts. This is a dangerous task, no question. But with that danger comes a unique opportunity. Serve well, and your path to forging your chain may be accelerated. The Citadel rewards loyalty and competence." A swirl of conflicting emotions washed over Boros. He thought of dragons as wonders, but also as harbingers of war. He recalled the horrifying details he had studied in forbidden texts. Could their mission be justified? Did loyalty to the Citadel mean stifling all chance of a dragon's return? Vale cleared his throat. "There is a ship, the Silver Wing, departing Old Town's port in 3 days, bound for Lys. Once there, you will seek out any leads on stolen eggs, hidden caches of Valyrian tomes, or rumors of living dragons. If you find them, do what you must to ensure they do not threaten Westeros. Our contact in Lys will guide you further." Before Boros could protest, Vale rose from his chair, a clear sign the meeting was ended. "Remember, Vale added, voice firm. The Citadel's oath is to serve the realm. Dragons serve only themselves and those who would wield them for power. We do what we must to keep the realm safe. Boros left the Solar in a daze. Over the next few days, he prepared for the journey, collecting reference scrolls, potions, and coded letters from Walgrave. He found himself exchanging uneasy glances with other novices who sensed something unusual was afoot. On the morning of his departure, Walgrave met him at the Citadel gates. The old man pressed a small leather-bound journal into Boros's hands. "Take this," he said softly, resting a hand on the younger man's shoulder. "Within these pages are your instructions and some translations that may prove useful. Remember, knowledge is a weapon, Boros, and like any weapon, it can protect or destroy. Wield it carefully." Boros nodded. The raven perched on Walgrave's shoulder let out a single caw that seemed to echo in the courtyard. With that, Boros turned and made his way to the harbor, accompanied by Maester Ceres. A tall, thin man with deep-set eyes and a serious demeanor, and Liriano, the Lycene alchemist, whose flamboyant attire contrasted sharply with the somber robes of the maesters. Liriano's presence alone drew stares from passers-by in Old Town, but none dared question them too openly. After all, they traveled under the Citadel's auspices, and that still commanded respect. The Silver Wing was a modest cog with a single mast, crewed by sailors who recognized Citadel authority. The ship slipped out of Old Town's harbor under a pale dawn sky, gulls crying overhead. Boros stood at the railing, watching the imposing form of the high tower recede. His heart clenched. He was leaving behind the only life he had known, venturing into a realm of secrets, lies, and hidden dangers. With every heartbeat, he felt the weight of the mission pressing on him, to find the last vestiges of dragon knowledge and ensure it never again threatened Westeros. Yet a pang of uncertainty gnawed at him. Was this truly the right course? Or was the Citadel meddling in powers too great for mortal hands? They sailed south and east, skirting the coast of Dorne and crossing the Sea of Dorne to the Stepstones. The journey took weeks. Each day, Boros studied the cryptic references Walgrave had given him, practiced his High Valyrian, and tried to glean what little else he could from Maester Ceres. But Ceres was guarded, offering scant details about the plan. "We will know more once we reach Lys," he would say, fiddling with a set of small vials in a leather bandolier strapped across his chest. Liriano, on the other hand, proved talkative, too talkative for Boros's comfort. He boasted of Lycene illusions that could make a man appear as another, potions that could smother the will of a beast. Yet he deflected questions about whether he believed any dragons still existed. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, painting the sea in fiery hues, Boros stood at the ship's prow. The wind tugged at his cloak. He found himself imagining how a dragon might glide across the skies at twilight, scales catching the dying light in a shimmer of red and gold. A quiet footstep behind him broke his reverie. Ceres joined him. The older maester's voice was subdued. "I see that look in your eyes. You wonder about them, don't you?" He leaned against the railing. Long ago, before the Citadel was so fearful, knowledge of dragons was studied more openly, at least the biological aspects. We sought to understand their physiology, their life cycles, their capabilities. But as the Targaryens grew in power, and their dragons were used in war, the Citadel's stance hardened. We saw the devastation, the thousands of deaths, the burning fields. A single dragon can shift the balance of power in a realm. That is anathema to our mission of stability. Boros folded his arms over his chest. "I understand the fear, but is it truly our place to interfere with the natural order? Dragons existed long before the Targaryens, long before the Citadel." Ceres sighed, his breath carried away on the wind. "Yes, they did. But we live in an age of men, and men do not handle such power well. The Citadel's stance is clear. If dragons were to rise again, entire kingdoms could burn. The knowledge we hold is a safeguard. We do not intend to flaunt it, but should the threat become real, we will act." He paused, weighing his words. "This mission may force you to witness unpleasant things, Boros. We may have to do unsavory deeds. Remember, we do it for the good of the realm." That night, sleep came fitfully again. Boros could not dispel visions of coiling serpents of flame, nor reconcile them with the possibility that dragons were more than just instruments of destruction. He knew the Citadel's doctrine, but a sliver of doubt took root in his heart. They reached Lys at last. The free city shimmered on the horizon like a jewel, its marble towers and lavish villas gleaming in the afternoon sun. Pleasure barges drifted along the waterways, music and laughter echoing across the harbor. Even at a glance, Boros could see the city's famed beauty, but also sense an undercurrent of danger. Lys was a city of pleasure, intrigue, and decadence, where fortunes were made and lost by the hour. Once docked, they were met by a middle-aged Lycene woman named Sebastian. Tall, elegant, with skin the color of mahogany and eyes lined with coal. She wore a half-mask of silver filigree, giving her an enigmatic aura. Her accent was thick but understandable. "Welcome, travelers," she said in a tone that suggested she was accustomed to dealing with clients who required discretion. Liriano greeted her with a flamboyant bow. Maester Ceres offered a small nod. Boros, uncertain, simply dipped his head respectfully. Sebastian led them through the winding streets, past perfumed gardens and grand courtyards where courtesans lounged, sipping wine from crystal goblets. At length, they arrived at a discreet villa near the outskirts, surrounded by tall cypress trees that concealed the compound from prying eyes. Guards armed with curved daggers stood watch at the gates. Sebastian ushered them inside, where they were greeted by a spacious foyer lit with red lanterns. When they were alone, Sebastian's demeanor became serious. She removed her half-mask, revealing a face etched with concern. "So, you are the ones the Citadel sends. I expected more formidable presences." Ceres bristled. "We are quite capable, I assure you." She offered a faint smirk. "Very well. We have little time." Rumors swirl in Lys of a man called Moro Volorin, said to be a collector of Valyrian artifacts. Some claim he possesses a partial dragon skull, though most think it a hoax. More alarmingly, there are whispers that he recently acquired something even rarer, an intact dragon egg. He paid a fortune in gold and pearls for it. No one knows if it is viable, but many believe it is real. The last man who tried to steal from Moro died in a particularly gruesome manner. She looked pointedly at Liriano. "He is not a man to be trifled with." Boros exchanged a glance with Ceres, whose eyes gleamed with cautious interest. "We need to find out if this egg is indeed real," Ceres said. "If it is, we must ensure it never becomes a threat." Sebastian nodded. "You will need subtlety. Moro's estate is heavily guarded, and he consorts with sorcerers from the Shadowlands. There are rumors that he even employs a blood mage. Even if you gain entrance, how do you plan to handle the situation?" Liriano chuckled, patting a leather satchel at his side. "Leave that to us, dear Sebastian. We have certain resources." Boros felt a creeping anxiety. He knew from his reading that the Citadel possessed spells and potions to sterilize or even destroy dragon eggs, but executing such an act within a heavily guarded estate sounded perilous. Another question loomed unasked. Was Moro truly an enemy, or merely an eccentric collector? The lines blurred in the realm of power. Thus began their infiltration into Lys's underbelly. Ceres spent days gathering intelligence in the wine sinks and pleasure houses, disguised in common garments. Liriano used his local contacts to discover who supplied Moro's estate: cooks, spice merchants, silk peddlers, and the like. Boros pored over the coded texts Walgrave had provided, looking for references to illusions or wards that might cloak their intentions. They found that Moro was indeed rumored to hold a lavish masquerade in a week's time, a night of revelry where the city's elite and mystics converged. Invitations were exclusive. Gaining entry would require cunning. Sebastian arranged for forged invitations, but at a steep cost that threatened to empty the Citadel's coffers if they were not careful. The day of the masquerade arrived, and Boros found himself dressed in finery that felt alien on his body. A dark red doublet trimmed in gold, with a half-mask concealing his features. Ceres wore the attire of a foreign scholar, while Liriano dressed in a flamboyant costume of bright silks. Their plan was straightforward yet fraught with risk. Mingle among the guests, locate the rumored egg, use certain potions to render it inert or destroy it, then slip away before Moro or his guards caught on. They arrived at Moro's estate by litter, passing through towering gates into a courtyard lit by hundreds of floating lanterns. Music drifted through the night air, accompanied by the scent of exotic flowers. Guests danced, their laughter echoing in the marble halls. Servants offered wine in goblets shaped like coiling serpents. Everywhere Boros looked, Lycene decadence shimmered. Yet he also saw bodyguards in corners, men with cold eyes and hidden blades. Tension coiled in Boros's gut. This was a den of serpents, and they walked it with desperate purpose. They split up, each tasked with gathering clues. Boros drifted toward a hall that displayed Moro's private gallery of curiosities. Statues of Valyrian design, ancient swords in glass cases, gold-chased dragon figurines lined the walls. The place teemed with wealthy guests sipping from jeweled cups, exclaiming over the relics. Boros listened, drifting from group to group, until he overheard two men discussing the rumored egg. Their conversation indicated that Moro kept the egg in a locked vault near the rear of the estate, guarded by men who never left their post. Slipping away from the crowd, Boros found a deserted corridor. He pressed himself against the wall, scanning for guards. His heart thudded violently. He was no trained spy. Even so, the knowledge gleaned from the Citadel and Walgrave's texts guided him. He found the hall leading to the vault. Two guards stood there, each armed with a cruelly curved sword. He ducked back before they saw him. Fear rippled through him. This mission, this entire premise, it felt more real and more dangerous than any scenario he had imagined while copying manuscripts. A soft footfall sounded behind him. He whirled, nearly crying out, only to see Cerys, mask half askew, stepping up quietly. The older maester lifted a finger to his lips, then showed Boros a small vial. He whispered, "Smoke lotus extract. Inhaled, it causes hallucinations or unconsciousness. But we must be swift. Liriano will distract them." As if on cue, Liriano appeared at the far end of the corridor, swaying theatrically, feigning drunkenness, singing a bawdy Lycene tune at the top of his lungs. The guards tensed, stepping away from their post to confront the intruder. In that moment, Cerys flicked open the vial and waved it in the guard's direction, releasing a thin stream of pale vapor. The corridor's draft carried it toward them. One guard cursed, clutching his head. The other stumbled, swaying drunkenly. Liriano kept singing, weaving closer as if to cling to them for support. Within seconds, the guards collapsed against the wall, eyes rolling back. Boros could hardly believe it had worked. Cerys motioned for him to follow, and they dashed to the vault door, an imposing slab of black metal etched with draconic motifs. Another lock of Valyrian steel. Cerys frowned, producing a set of strange picks from his robe. "Watch the corridor," he said, dropping to one knee. Boros stood guard, heart hammering, counting the seconds as muffled music from the main hall seeped into the corridor. At last, with a soft click, the lock yielded. They slipped inside, closing the door behind them. The vault was dimly lit by braziers, the walls lined with shelves of rare treasures, chests of gemstones, ornate golden chalices, ancient scrolls. In the center, resting on a velvet cushion, was a large egg mottled with green and silver scales. The shell glimmered in the firelight, almost alive. Boros stepped closer, transfixed. Never had he seen anything like it. Though inert, it radiated a kind of quiet majesty. He found himself trembling, not just in fear but in awe. If it were real, then here lay the seed of a potential dragon, a living wonder of the old world. He glanced at Cerys, who had already pulled out another vial. This one contained a pitch-black liquid. The method was one Boros had read about, an alchemical reagent derived from a rare plant in Sithorios, capable of seeping through the shell's pores to poison the embryonic life within. "Once introduced," Cerys whispered, "the egg will be rendered lifeless. Even if it's not viable already, This ensures it can never hatch." His voice shook slightly. "Quickly, we must do it before the guards recover or more arrive." Boros stared at the egg. "Wait," he whispered, voice thick with indecision. "Are we certain? What if this is the last living egg in the world? If the Targaryens were once tyrants, does that mean all dragons must be destroyed?" Cerys's eyes hardened. "The Citadel's will is clear, Boros. Our mission is clear. The realm is safer without dragons." His hand trembling, Boros reached out. Then doubt collided with his sense of duty. How could they be certain that the Citadel's fear was justified? The texts he had read showed the horrors of dragons used in war, but also indicated that dragons were an integral part of the world's magic, of its balance. Memories of Walgrave's words echoed. "Knowledge is a weapon, and a weapon can protect or destroy." "Boros, we don't have time," Cerys insisted, uncorking the vial. The young acolyte opened his mouth to protest, but it was too late. Cerys had tipped the vial onto the egg. Dark fluid coursed over the glimmering shell, hissing as it sank into the scales. A faint crackling noise followed, as though the egg resisted. Boros felt a pang, as if something precious was being snuffed out. In that moment, the vault door slammed open. Guards poured in, led by a figure robed in midnight blue. His face was obscured by a mask wrought in the shape of a dragon's snout. With a flick of the figure's hand, a bolt of greenish fire leapt across the room, striking the brazier behind Boros and Cerys. The brazier spilled, igniting the tapestries on the wall. Flames roared to life. Boros dove to the floor, rolling aside as another arc of green fire seared the air above him. Cerys cursed, tossing a small glass orb that shattered in midair, releasing a cloud of shimmering powder. One of the guards stumbled, racked with coughing, but the robed figure pressed forward, seemingly immune. Liriano dashed in behind them, brandishing a short, curved dagger that pulsed with an eerie light. Chaos consumed the vault in an instant. Swirling flame, clashing steel, and arcane energies colliding. Boros scrambled to his feet, glancing at the egg, now coated in that black alchemical fluid. The cracks in its shell glistened as if under stress, but no immediate destruction was visible. The robed sorcerer unleashed another torrent of green flame. Cerys deflected it with a silvered mirror he had pulled from inside his robe, scattering the flames across the ceiling. Paint and plaster began to blacken. The guards lunged. Liriano flung a handful of metallic dust at them, which exploded in a flash of brilliant light. Blinded, the guards stumbled. "Grab the egg," Cerys shouted, voice strained. "We can't let them save it if it's still viable." Boros lurched toward the cushion. The sorcerer, seeing his intent, launched a swirling lance of emerald fire that would have incinerated the acolyte had Liriano not tackled the robed man from behind at the last second. The flame went wide, scorching the shelves. Precious artifacts shattered or began to burn. Boros grabbed the egg, feeling the surprising warmth of its shell even through his gloves. The black alchemical fluid trickled between his fingers. He clenched his jaw, knowing that if the egg had contained any spark of life, it was now awash in poison. "Go!" Liriano shouted, grappling with the sorcerer. Boros and Cerys dashed through the door. In the corridor, more guards rushed toward them, but the smoke lotus vapor still lingered. Several reeled, uncertain. Boros held the egg tightly, its weight a grim reminder of what had just transpired. They navigated the twisting corridors of Moro's estate, alarm bells clanging in the distance. Servants screamed and scattered. Somewhere behind them, Liriano's voice shouted in Lysine, but the words were lost in the cacophony. When they finally burst out into the night air, the estate's courtyard was ablaze with panic. They skirted the main gates, climbing a low wall near a stable. Boros handed the egg over to Cerys, who wrapped it in a cloth. They slipped into the darkness of the adjoining streets, hearts pounding. Only once they were several blocks away did they pause to catch their breath, ducking into a narrow alley. Cerys sank to his knees, clutching the egg. Sweat streamed down his brow. "We have to get out of Lys immediately," he said, Moro's men, and whomever that sorcerer was, will be after us. The Citadel will want us to confirm the egg is destroyed. But we cannot remain here. A swirl of conflicting emotions churned in Boros's chest. They had succeeded in their mission, hadn't they? Or at least begun the process. The alchemical poison was sure to kill whatever might have slumbered inside. Yet as he stared at the egg, now dull and coated in black residue, he felt no triumph, only a hollow ache. He recalled the awe he had felt upon seeing it. Had they truly done the right thing? They lingered just long enough to see if Liriano would rejoin them. The minutes stretched. Shouts echoed through the streets. Smoke rose from the direction of Moro's estate, tinted orange by the distant flames. The city watch would surely respond soon. Saris clenched his jaw, cursing softly in a language Boros did not recognize. "We cannot wait," he said at last, voice trembling with anger or grief or both. He knew the risks. Reluctantly, Boros nodded. He followed Saris deeper into the labyrinth of Lys, the egg bundled beneath the older man's cloak. They navigated side streets and hidden alleys, evading patrols until they reached a modest inn near the docks, owned by one of Sebastian's associates. There they found Sebastian waiting, anxious. She ushered them into a dimly lit back room. "What happened?" she asked, her tone urgent. "I heard rumors of green fire and screams coming from Moro's estate." Saris's features were grim. "The place is in chaos. Moro had a powerful sorcerer. Liriano, we lost him." Sebastian's eyes widened. "Then you must leave Lys immediately. Moro will tear the city apart to find you. The next ship for Westeros sails at dawn, but it will be a dangerous crossing if Moro's men lurk at the docks." Boros looked at the egg. "Does it still live?" He felt foolish even asking, yet the question burned within him. Saris studied the shell under the flickering lamplight. The black fluid had dried into streaks across the mottled green and silver. Fine cracks webbed the surface. "The poison was meant to be irreversible," he murmured. "I see no sign of life. Our mission is accomplished." His voice held no triumph, only resignation. Sebastian arranged for false passage to Tyrosh on a trading cog, from which they could continue on to Westeros. They departed before first light, slipping out under the cover of night with Sebastian's hired guards leading them to the docks. Sure enough, Moro's men patrolled there, but the port was large and chaotic. Under the guidance of Sebastian's associate, they boarded a small dinghy that ferried them to the anchored vessel. As dawn broke, the trading cog set sail, forging eastward away from Lys. But not even the open sea felt safe now. During the voyage, Boros found little comfort. The egg remained wrapped in cloth, stashed in a small chest in Saris's quarters. A tension crackled between them, as though the price of victory had been too steep. If Liriano yet lived, he was a prisoner at best. They had no way of saving him. One evening, as the wind whipped the sails and the smell of salt filled the air, Boros gathered his courage to speak with Saris in private. They stood at the stern, where the sea churned in their wake. "Did we truly serve the realm tonight?" Boros asked quietly. Saris's response came slowly. "We served the Citadel's will, Boros. The realm benefits from the absence of dragons." Boros looked down at the foaming sea. "I've read the same histories you have. The dragons brought terror, but they also ushered in unity under the Targaryen reign. They forged the 7 kingdoms. Without them, Westeros might be 7 warring kingdoms still. And with them, we saw the dance of the dragons, the devastation of Harrenhal, the burning fields of the Reach." Saris shot back. "You are naive if you think dragons can exist without men using them as weapons. And men's ambition has no bounds." Silence hung between them. Boros said nothing, but he couldn't quell the doubt in his heart. If knowledge was a weapon, had the Citadel chosen to wield it rightly, or had they become the very thing they claimed to oppose? They arrived in Tyrosh and found passage to Volantis, then boarded another ship for Westeros, a circuitous route intended to throw off pursuit. The journey lasted weeks, marked by storms and near run-ins with pirates off the stepstones. When at last they sighted the coasts of Dorne, Boros felt a rush of relief tinged with shame. He had left Old Town with a sense of scholarly excitement, but he returned feeling hardened, older beyond his years. In his heart, the events in Lys gnawed at him, like a wound that refused to close. Word reached them at a port in the Stormlands that Archmaester Walgrave had fallen ill. Boros's chest tightened with concern. He urged Cerys to hasten their return to the Citadel. They traveled by land, passing through rolling fields and bustling market towns, the rhythms of Westeros both familiar and comforting. At each inn, Boros heard gossip. Rumors of turmoil in King's Landing, whispers of dragons in the east, speculation about the Citadel's increasing secrecy. None of it felt quite real to him anymore, overshadowed by his own experiences. Finally, they crossed the Honeywine River and saw the towering beacon of the Hightower once more. Entering the Citadel felt surreal, as though they had left for years instead of mere months. Archmaester Vale greeted them with tight-lipped approval. The egg, presumably inert, was taken into a sealed vault deeper even than the one Walgrave had shown Boros. Cerys delivered a full report to the Council of Archmaesters behind closed doors. Boros was not invited, but he could imagine the questions and the curt nods as Cerys recounted Liriano's sacrifice and the success of their mission. The next day, Boros rushed to Walgrave's chambers. He found the old man in bed, propped up by pillows, his face pale. Several ravens hopped nervously around the room, as though mirroring their master's distress. Walgrave's eyes brightened faintly at the sight of Boros. "You've returned," he rasped, voice weak but laced with relief. "I heard rumors. I was afraid I'd never see you again." Boros knelt beside the bed, placing a trembling hand on Walgrave's. "We succeeded, Archmaester," he said softly, though the words tasted bitter on his tongue. "We neutralized a dragon egg in Lys." Walgrave's gaze flickered, and he closed his eyes. "At what cost?" he asked hoarsely. Boros swallowed. Memories of Liriano's frantic last stand and the robed sorcerer's green fire flashed through his mind. "We lost good people," he managed. "But the Citadel is safe, and so is the realm, if that egg was truly viable." The old Archmaester sighed. Exhaustion etched into his features. "Sit, Boros. I have something I must tell you, while I still have the strength." Boros pulled a stool close to the bed. Walgrave gazed at him, eyes full of sorrow and understanding. "I sense your conflict. I once felt it, too. When I was a young man, I believed in the Citadel's mission wholeheartedly. Preserve knowledge, safeguard the realm, let wisdom guide us. But knowledge is never so black and white. With time, I learned that seeking to control knowledge can lead us down a dark path. We do what we believe is necessary. Yet sometimes, I wonder if the realm would be better served by letting dragons, letting magic, find its own place in the world." A tear slipped down Boros's cheek, unbidden. The old man reached out, squeezing his hand with surprising strength. "We are men, Boros. We attempt to harness forces that may be beyond us. This mission you undertook, I do not doubt that the Archmaesters believe it just, but your conscience, never let them take that from you. Keep questioning. Keep searching for truth. That is the core of scholarship." Boros nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He stayed with Walgrave until the old man drifted into a fitful sleep. Outside, the corridors of the Citadel bustled with novices and maesters oblivious to the weight on Boros's heart. As he walked those familiar halls, he felt altered in a way no forging of links could capture. The duties of an acolyte now felt trivial compared to the secrets he had witnessed. Days bled into weeks. Boros returned to his usual tasks, copying manuscripts, tending ravens, assisting Archmaesters in research. But the nightmares persisted. Occasionally, he spotted a hooded figure in the Citadel corridors or glimpsed hushed gatherings of Archmaesters. He suspected they planned further missions, that the threat of dragons had not ended with one egg in Lys. Indeed, new rumors reached Old Town of another potential egg in Pentos, of a Targaryen pretender wandering the Dothraki Sea. The Citadel's watchers throughout Westeros and Essos fed these whispers into the council's eager ears. One late evening, Boros was beckoned into a hidden study by Archmaester Vale. The older man's austere face flickered in the glow of a single candle. "Boros, I hear Walgrave has taken you under his wing." Vale began, eyeing him with curiosity. "You have proven valuable to us, showing both courage and discretion. You will soon forge your first link, I suspect, but I ask you, are you prepared to do more for the Citadel? We face many threats yet. Your knowledge of Valyrian glyphs would be invaluable in what is to come." Boros's stomach tightened. He stared at Vale, who watched him expectantly. The question stretched beyond forging links. It was a question of loyalty, of complicity. He recalled Walgrave's words, "Never let them take your conscience." In that instant, Boros realized that the Citadel's mission, noble at its inception, had grown into something shadowy, tangled in moral compromise. He exhaled slowly. "Archmaester, I am here to serve the realm, but I also serve knowledge itself. If the Citadel demands that I blindly snuff out every glimmer of draconic life, I must think carefully. I will always act in the best interest of peace. But I cannot pretend this path is easy or always just." Vale's eyes narrowed, though his tone remained measured. "Mind your words, Acolyte. We all have doubts at times, but the Citadel's purpose is clear. We cannot allow our realm to be threatened by the horrors of the past. If you stand with us, you will rise swiftly. If not, your path here may be limited." Boros nodded, not trusting himself to speak further. After he left Vale's study, he walked the Citadel's grounds for hours, lost in thought. The starry sky above seemed distant and vast, a silent witness to the turbulence in his heart. Eventually, he found himself at Walgrave's chamber door. The old man lay sleeping, breathing shallowly, ravens perched on the headboard. Boros watched him for a moment, recalling the gentle encouragement Walgrave had shown him over the years, how the Archmaester had first introduced him to the wonders of learning, how he had trusted Boros with the darkest secrets of the vault. Boros thought of the inert egg, now locked away in the Citadel's bowels. If it had once held life, that life was extinguished. The Citadel would continue to gather forbidden lore, to guard against the return of dragons, and if rumors of new eggs or living dragons surfaced again, they would send men like Boros to do what must be done. And so it would go on, an unbroken cycle of secrecy and destruction, unless someone questioned it deeply enough to break the pattern. In the days that followed, Boros found himself preparing to forge his first link. Yet each time he sat down to the tasks required, writing treatises, demonstrating knowledge of a subject, the memory of that scorched vault in Lys would distract him. He thought about Liriano's final moments, of the sorcerer's terrifying powers, of how quickly the illusions and potions were deployed. He wondered if the Citadel was at war not just with dragons but with magic itself. No matter how he turned it in his mind, the moral lines remained blurred. He began to dream of a different future, one in which knowledge of dragons could be preserved, not destroyed, where the Citadel might study them, perhaps even learn how to coexist without using them as weapons. But such dreams stood in stark opposition to the Citadel's current stance. And the Citadel was not known for tolerating dissent on matters it deemed existential to the realm. So Boros studied on, wearing the mask of a dutiful acolyte while a tempest swirled in his conscience. He spent hours in the Citadel's dusty corners, diving into old manuscripts from Maester Eamon, who had once pondered the deeper meaning of dragons. He pored over fragments of Valyrian lore that suggested dragons were tied to the world's deeper mysteries, that they might be connected to the cycles of magic and seasons. The more he read, the more he sensed the Citadel's policy might be short-sighted or worse, driven by fear that overshadowed the pursuit of truth. Late one night, while copying passages about the properties of dragonglass, he came across an old annotation scrawled in the margin by a maester long dead. Dragons are not mere beasts. They are part of the realm's heartbeat, as integral as the seasons. To eradicate them may be to kill a piece of the world's magic. Boros stared at the words for a long time, heart pounding. He felt a sudden urge to hide the annotation, to protect it from the eyes of those who might strike it out. But then he realized that was precisely the fear the Citadel cultivated, fear of knowledge. He left the annotation as it was, imprinting the words upon his memory. In the months that followed, as Archmaester Walgrave's health declined, Boros spent more time at the old man's bedside, reading to him, discussing minor matters of scholarship. The old Archmaester would drift in and out, occasionally lucid enough to reminisce. One evening, Walgrave reached for Boros's hand and whispered, "Remember, knowledge is not the villain. Fear is." Then his eyes slid closed, and he said no more that night. Boros carried those words like a beacon in a dark wood. He began to consider that perhaps the best way to serve the realm was to remain within the Citadel, to rise in its ranks, to gain access to the highest secrets. Perhaps then, from within, he might temper their zeal for eradicating dragons, or at least ensure the knowledge was not twisted beyond reason. And yet, at times, he glimpsed Vale's hawkish stare or heard rumors of novices who vanished after showing too much curiosity in forbidden lore. He realized he walked a razor's edge. His dreams persisted, images of dragons soaring over the whispering sound, their shadows dancing across the Citadel's towers. Sometimes they burned the city to ash. Other times they glided peacefully, like guardians of an older, deeper magic. In these dreams, Boros stood upon the high tower, torn between reaching out to the dragons and turning away. And always, in the end, the dragons vanished into the horizon, leaving him alone on that spire. And so the Citadel pressed on with its hidden war, gathering tidings from across the narrow sea, sending out quiet agents, forging alliances in the shadows. Rumors of new eggs sprang up like weeds. One in Bravos, another in the hills of Norvos, still more in the red waste of Essos. The Citadel's apparatus of informants churned. Each rumor demanded investigation, each discovery prompting a new expedition, and so on. Boros, still young and unchained, watched these maneuvers with a growing sense of disquiet. He had a place within the grand design now, but he could not shake the suspicion that they were playing with fate. Some nights, in the privacy of his cramped cell, he wondered if even the Citadel's vast knowledge was insufficient to truly control dragons, or the forces that beckoned them back into the world. For all the scrolls and vaults and hidden spells, the Citadel was merely an institution of men, subject to human fears and ambitions. If dragons were indeed linked to the world's magic, then in seeking to smother them, the Citadel might be meddling in the realm's natural order. Yet confronting the Council of Archmaesters would be folly. Their power and resolve were unyielding, and so the unending question lingered. Was the Citadel right to use forbidden lore to prevent dragons from ever rising again, or had they cast themselves as the villains in a drama larger than they could imagine? Boros did not yet know which was true. He only knew that as time went on, as he delved deeper into those guarded tomes and glimpsed more of the Citadel's hidden networks, his sense of foreboding grew. A day came when Archmaester Walgrave passed quietly in his sleep, leaving behind a legacy of ravenscraft and one conflicted acolyte who had seen both the noble and the dark side of the Citadel's mission. Boros stood vigil at the simple ceremony, watching the black-cloaked maesters carry Walgrave's body to a boat bound for the Whispering Sound, where it would be committed to the waters. The raven that always perched on Walgrave's shoulder cawed mournfully as the boat drifted away, smoke from the funeral fire trailing into the sky. Boros felt something inside him shift in that moment. Walgrave had been his anchor, a guide who tempered the Citadel's stern dictates with compassion and caution. Now that anchor was gone. At the edge of the dock, Vale stood stoically, his expression inscrutable. Other Archmaesters whispered among themselves. Boros knew he was at a crossroads. He could continue to climb the Citadel's ranks, forging link after link, mastering more of its secrets. He might try from within to shape its policies. Or, one day, he could choose a different path. One that might even lead him far from Old Town in pursuit of the truth about dragons, about magic, about the realm's deeper mysteries. For now, he remained. He returned to the Citadel's halls, carrying the memory of that smothered egg in Lys, of the green flames and the sorcerer's wrath, of Liriano's sacrifice and Walgrave's final words. And he wondered if, should the day come when a living dragon truly rose in the sky again, he would have the fortitude to question the Citadel's orders, or if he would brandish the poison himself in the name of preserving a fragile peace. In that silent tension, life at the Citadel rolled on. Novices studied, ravens flew, archmasters debated. Yet in the stillness of the deepest night, behind locked doors and sealed vaults, the Citadel's hidden war against dragons continued, fueled by fear, sustained by forbidden lore, and orchestrated by men who believed they acted for the good of all. And somewhere beyond Old Town's horizon, in the wide seas of Essos or the shadowed corners of the known world, knowledge that might rekindle the flame of dragons waited, biding its time, like embers smoldering beneath ash, ready to blaze forth again in defiance of all mortal schemes. And in his heart, Boros carried that final flicker of doubt, that spark of wonder, which no amount of fear or secrecy could wholly extinguish. For knowledge, once awakened, proved as stubborn as any dragon's fire. And no vault, no matter how dark or deep, could contain it forever.